Russian negotiators are softening their position behind the scenes. At the same time, Italy has started pressuring Ukraine to agree to Kremlin's terms. My name is Albina Pidhirniak. Joining me on the stream today is Andreas Umland, Stockholm Center for East European Studies analyst. Mr. Umland, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me again.
So Trump said the end of the war is near. What do you think about this optimism of the US president?
Well, I wish he is right, although I'm skeptical because I don't see yet enough conditions for a compromise. The Russian economy is now in crisis, and the situation is in that regard better than a year ago. But my estimate is that the current problems that the Kremlin has, economic problems, military problems, are insufficient to make the Kremlin to go for some real compromise. So for me, what is currently happening is a negotiation theater or even negotiation circus and not a real negotiation. For that, the preconditions are not yet there.
Russian negotiators behind the scenes, as they said, are softening their position in Ukraine. Is this real, how do you think, or just a tactic? Are they ready for compromise, or is it just for the American side?
Again, I would be glad to be wrong on my skepticism. What has been happening, in fact, over the last year is less a negotiation about the Russian-Ukrainian war than a competition between Russia and Ukraine for the attention and for the sympathy of Donald Trump. And Russia is trying to get Trump on its side. Ukraine is trying to keep Trump in the Western camp, and other European countries are trying to do the same. And Trump likes this situation that he's been sort of courted from both sides, and he sees lots of positive things, and the people around him, of course, follow his line and see lots of positive things. But the record of the last year is very sad, that the attacks on Ukraine have increased, not decreased, and the number of civilian victims from this attack over the year 2025 was the largest number so far during the war. So the real situation has actually become worse, and in the last couple of weeks much worse for Ukraine, whereas Trump and his negotiators talk about progress and let themselves be sort of impressed by this Russian negotiation theater.
Caroline Levitt said that Trump knows about the negotiations, but she immediately started talking about the Middle East at the recent press conference. How actively the US president involved in the peace track now? How do you think?
Frankly, I don't think he is much interested and much involved. He has now these two representatives, Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner, who are trying to do something, and I wish them success. And I wish that this negotiation will have a real result, but I have my doubts that this will happen at the current point in time, because, as I said, I don't see yet enough pressure on Russia to go for real compromise. Instead, Russia is simply trying to do with diplomatic means what it is unable to do with military means. It's trying to get from Ukraine the remaining parts of the Donbas, which are well defended and which are an important part of the Ukrainian front line and defense line. And that's why now the Russian side is trying to sort of instrumentalize the Trump administration to achieve an aim that Russia is unable to achieve with military means.
What do you think? How does the Russia-Ukraine war affect Trump's approval rating and the chances of the Republican Party in the upcoming elections?
Well, we know from the opinion polls that Ukraine still remains popular with ordinary Americans, and that Putin is seen very negatively. Zelenskyy is actually more popular among Americans than President Trump. And that is in spite of the large pro-Russian and anti-Ukrainian campaign that the ultra-conservative, especially social media, but also normal media, is currently trying to do, and so far this campaign does not have much of an effect. So I don't think the course of the war and the ending or the lack of the ending of the war is something that Trump can ignore. On the other hand, one has to sort of say that one should not overestimate here the impact of foreign policy or foreign affairs for electoral campaigns. Usually electoral campaigns are decided by voters who care about domestic issues, economic issues, social issues, and not so much about foreign affairs. They can play a role, and maybe we will see here some sort of exclusion to the rule that domestic factors are usually dominant. But so far, I'm not sure that really his lack of success concerning Ukraine is that much of a problem for Trump. He has also many other problems domestically.
The Institute of the Study of War said that Russia is trying to make the US pressure on Ukraine. How do you think, what is your opinion about this? Is this a successful story for Russia?
In a way, yes, that the US has basically left the Western camp for the time being. And whereas other Western countries, not only European countries, but also other democracies like Japan, Australia, Canada, are supporting Ukraine, the US does so only to a limited extent. There's still intelligence sharing going on between Ukraine and the US, but the US is also profiting from this intelligence sharing. And the US is still ready to sell its weapon to European countries that purchase weapons, American weapons for Ukraine. But again, this is a business operation and not help. So in a way, Russia can rejoice here that the US is not any longer fully supporting Ukraine. But I don't think that this will lead to a change of the Ukrainian position. What Russia currently wants is that Ukraine gives up these unoccupied parts of the Donbas. Of course, Ukraine will not do that. That would be an absurdity in many ways, morally, legally, strategically, militarily, so I don't think that this U.S. pressure on Zelenskyy will function.
Boris Pistorius said that Germany has used its capabilities to support Ukraine's air defense. Will Germany continue helping Ukraine?
Yeah, Germany will continue. The problem is how much Germany can do, not how much Germany wants to do. The issue of air defense is uncontroversial in Germany, and the problem is that Germany does not have enough capacity to provide here sufficient support to Ukraine. There's another issue, of course, the old issue of the Taurus cruise missiles. Here we still have the situation that the majority of Germans is against delivering this particular weapon to Ukraine. There wouldn't be many of these cruise missiles anyway that Germany could give Ukraine. So Germany is now clearly on Ukraine's side and is one of the most pro-Ukrainian European countries now. But in spite of Germany being a very powerful economy, it is unable to provide Ukraine with all the necessary means to defend itself. The German military-industrial complex is much smaller than the American, for instance, and that's why Germany's role will here be limited.
We understand this, and we absolutely very thankful for German people, and we feel that Germany is on our side. But how do you think? Why does he said this in such a difficult times, or it's a real it's a real problem with German help to Ukraine, and they have no possibility to help on the future.
Germany is now undergoing a change. The military-industrial complex is being developed, and Germany is also improving its own army. But unfortunately, currently, this is the lack of capacity is so large that there cannot be an immediate quick improvement. What I think the Western countries, especially the European countries, could and should do now, that they directly support Ukraine air defense with fighter planes, with interceptor planes over Ukraine that would help Ukraine to shoot down missiles and drones over Ukraine. In central Ukraine, in western Ukraine, perhaps not close to the front line, rather in the areas which are far away from the front line. That would be a largely riskless operation, but unfortunately, the European countries are too timid to do this. And also the Central East European countries like Poland and Romania are apparently not ready to provide their airports for such support, direct support with Western airplanes for the protection of Ukrainian civilians.
Do you think is a threat to Europe at this time because Russia has increased its anti-European propaganda?
Yes, the Russian anti-European propaganda is increasing, and of course the European countries have complicated, let's call it that way, domestic affairs. In particular, France could change its political orientation as a result of the next presidential elections. And in other countries, there are problematic situations as well. And Russia is, of course, trying to use that to increase these problems and to fire up its anti-European campaign. The European countries will have to do a lot to withstand this dual attack from Russia and from the US now as well, to preserve the European Union, the European project, and to preserve their own national democracies.
The Times writes that Germany is preparing to defend against a possible attack from Moscow. Do you think this is a direct escalation? It will be.
Yes, that could happen, although I don't think it is likely to happen. I think there are just too many other countries that Russia would attack earlier. For Germany, the question will be, of course, as a NATO member and also as an EU member, what Germany will do and how Germany will behave if an eastern flank country of the EU and NATO is being attacked. One of the Baltic countries would here the most likely case be. Will then Germany really fully support these countries and basically engage also against Russian troops? That could then lead to Germany's entry into the war if Russia decides to attack a NATO member country and an EU member country. But I don't think yet that Germany itself is threatened by a direct military attack by Russia, although hybrid war is, of course, very intense by Russia against Germany and maybe especially Germany.
How do you think, how much have Europeans accepted the fact that sooner or later they will have to stand up to Putin?
At least the political elites, the expert community, the diplomats, I think in most European countries have now gotten this. And they are now transforming the European Union and their own countries in expectation of a worst-case scenario that they will also have to fight Russia at some point. But as I said, I think this is all very good and proper to do, and is certainly justified from a security point of view. But if we look at the situation from the perspective of Moscow, there are simply other countries that Moscow is still also interested. First of all, Ukraine, of course. There's Moldova. There are the countries of the Southern Caucasus. Let's remember that Alexander Solzhenitsyn once thought that northern Kazakhstan should be actually a part of a larger Russia. So Russia has many options here. And I have my doubts that Russia will go for a direct confrontation with NATO.
China and its leader Xi Jinping have the ability to help end Russia's war against Ukraine by influencing the Russian dictator Vladimir Putin. This was said by Finland's Prime Minister Petteri Orpo during his visit to China. But it seems that China is not ready to take this action.
Yes, China is supporting Russia de facto in this war, not necessarily with Chinese soldiers or Chinese weapons, but the economic support is very visible. China is also doing that for its own gains, but without this economic support from China, Russia wouldn't be able to conduct this war. There's a lot of Chinese rhetoric about peace and cooperation and so on. But against the background of the real actions of China and this close alliance with Russia, I think the opposite is true. China is actually interested in a continuation of this war and is supporting Russia and, of course, wants to also thereby improve its own situation and perhaps prepare a similar attack on Taiwan.
The Italian Deputy Prime Minister spoke quite harshly to Zelenskyy, demanding that Ukraine agree to a so-called peace with Russia. How do you feel about Italy's position now?
Well, on the whole, I think Italy has taken a more pro-Ukrainian position than one expected when the right wing of Italian politics came to power. But now we have these strange signals sometimes, but I don't think they, like with the US, I don't think Zelenskyy or any other Ukrainian president can actually accept the or did you mean Italy? I didn't get it maybe correctly.
The Italy Prime Minister, Deputy Prime Minister, spoke about demanding demanding that Ukraine should agree to so-called peace with Russia, to the document that Trump proposed to Ukraine of 28 points, and to the position that Russia now propose on the not so-called but real negotiations for peace, yes. And now Italy has such a position that like a pressure to Ukraine, and this Prime Minister said that to Zelenskyy.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the Italian position is not entirely consistent here. But what this means is, what peace here means is a partial capitulation by Ukraine. That is what Russia wants, and that what is then this politician suggesting to Ukraine. The problem here is not only that this is not acceptable to Ukraine, and Ukraine will, of course, not agree to such an unjust peace and to a partial capitulation. But such a partial capitulation will just mean more war, because Russia will then draw the lessons that if enough pressure is exerted on a country, then you can get a good deal, and then it will attack Ukraine again, or it will attack other countries and try to do the same. And it could also attack a NATO country, and then Italy would be, if it fulfills its obligations under NATO, under the NATO treaty and the EU treaty, then Italy would be also in war with Russia. If that's what this Italian politician has in mind, then good luck.
Yes, and it's very strange that Italian politicians have such a position, understanding all these threats that we are talking about. Mr. Umland, I'm very thankful. I'm very thankful for this conversation, and it's a pleasure for me to talk with you. Always, I'll remind our viewers that you can write on the comments where you're watching us from. You can leave your comment about this conversation, and don't forget to press the button like under this video. I'll remind you that on the stream with me today was Andreas Umland. Thank you, Mr. Umland.
Thanks for having me again.